Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us this morning or this afternoon, depending on where you are. My name is Andrew Townsend. I'm an e-learning evangelist here at eLearning Brothers, and today we're going to be talking about using customizable courseware to prevent workplace harassment. This webinar will be recorded. We'll get it up on our blog early next week. Also, as we usually do, we'll send a copy of it out to all registrants after the webinar. Today, to talk about customizable courseware, we have Chris Willis, our Customizable Courseware Senior Project Manager, and Adam Cannon, one of our e-learning evangelists, and also a developer on some of the Customizable Courseware project. So thank you both of you for being here with us today. We're glad to have you both with us and excited to see what you have to show us. If you guys have questions during the webinar, we will be ready to take your questions in the questions panel. I'll try to bring up as many of these questions in front of Chris and Adam, and we'll also be answering some of those privately through that channel. Also, one of the things we like to do after the webinar is follow up as soon as possible. Sometimes it's just to get feedback. Most of the time we want to touch base and find out if anybody needs one-on-one clarification on the topic. So do know about that. So without further ado, I'll go ahead and turn the time over to you, Chris.
Thanks so much. And to get started, as always, I like to know a little bit more about, let's see here. I like to know a little bit more about who you are and who's on the presentation, and so that I can help tailor my presentation to you as my audience. So if you would, for polling, if you could tell us what's your role in harassment training. Are you an instructional designer and trainer or trainer? Are you an e-learning developer? Maybe you manage e-learning or learning development. Are you in business or HR or other? And you can use the question panel to let us know. And Andrew is going to pull those answers right now.
So we've got responses coming in, some early information. Looks like we have a lot of instructional designers and trainers here. We'll go ahead and close the polling in about 3 seconds. So last chance to vote. 3, 2, 1. And here's those results, Chris. About 67% of our audience is instructional designers and trainers. We have 17% e-learning developers and a few learning managers and business/HR people in the audience today.
Perfect. And I'm going to work really hard to give you guys some strategies that you can use for all three of those roles. So that's awesome. And for some reason, I'm having trouble with advancing with my clicker, so we'll just do it this way. So what interests you the most about what brought you here? Let me know that. Were you just curious, want to learn more about the subject, which today is harassment? Are you charged with meeting compliance requirements in your organization? Are you looking for the best practices for harassment prevention? I've got some great things for you if you are. You're here for the free resource that Adam built and the tool we're going to be showing you in the presentation, or other. Please let us know.
So currently, I'm not surprised with the responses that are coming in, the early responses. Right now, harassment is kind of a hot button topic in social media, in the news, everywhere. And so the vast majority of our audience here is selecting harassment prevention best practices. If you want to vote, we'll be closing this in about 3 seconds. So last chance, 3, 2, 1. And so like I said, looks like 60% of our audience is here for the prevention and best practices, meeting compliance requirements. We had some people select other, but let us know. Let us know what else brought you to this webinar in the questions panel. We want to know.
Fabulous. Yeah, thank you. And we were getting that feedback too. In fact, that's why we developed this webinar. One of our sales consultants let Andrew Civilly, our CEO, know that we're getting a lot of interest in harassment. How can we prevent harassment in our organization? Because the best way to address harassment of any kind is, of course, to prevent it. And so that's what actually prompted us to put this webinar together. Lastly, just a quick poll. Who in the audience is already familiar with our eLearning Brothers Customizable Courseware?
All right, lots of quick votes. Easy to pick a yes or a no here. I'll go ahead and close the polling in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, so about 65% of our audience has heard of it and is familiar with it. About 35 is not familiar with it.
Okay, super. I'm not going to be going into deeply customizable courseware, what it is, how you can get it, whatever. We'll be happy to talk about that to you later, schedule a time for a demo or a chat, or even just to answer questions. But for now, we're going to focus just on the matter at hand, which is some research-driven strategies for harassment prevention training to make that more effective in your organization. We are rolling out the free harassment requirements research tool that Adam has worked so hard on. It's a great tool. We'll show you what it is, how you might use it to enhance your own harassment, anti-harassment training, and how organizations use customizable courseware for an effective anti-harassment training on a budget. And one quick thing, just so I don't keep stumbling over it, I use harassment training and anti-harassment training interchangeably. Of course, I don't want to train people how to harass each other, but when we talk about harassment training, that's obviously what we're talking about, is harassment prevention. So we'll just leave that one like that. Also important, I have to give the disclaimer, this presentation is for learning purposes, should not be regarded as legal advice. Likewise, when we give you the tool, we'll be linking to state requirements and information about regulations around harassment training. Those are there as a resource to help you and guide you, but we are not a substitute for your knowing in your situation. We are not providing legal advice. So let's get into the very basics. Let's dig into it now and get into the fun stuff here. Give you something you can use about how to make better harassment training. Of course, harassment is, and for the purposes of this presentation, this is right out of our customizable courseware harassment course. Harassment is verbal or physical conduct that impacts or affects an individual's employment in a negative way, typically, unreasonably interferes with his or her work performance, or creates an intimidating, hostile, or offensive work environment. Examples of harassment include comments or jokes that are offensive or intimidating, bullying or aggressive behavior, pictures, displaying pictures or materials that are visual, inappropriate staring, unwanted sexual advances, or isolating or making fun of somebody based on gender identity. These are all explicit examples. In the course and in your course, one of the best practices is to actually offer very detailed and explicit examples so that there's no question about what is harassment. Sexual harassment is a special kind or special form of harassment, and there's two categories of sexual harassment: quid pro quo, which is basically something for something, or in general terms, offering someone something in exchange for sexual favors. Hostile work environment, again, that's no different no matter what kind of harassment we're talking about. It's just making it where the person feels uncomfortable to come to work. And the standard by which that is chosen is they apply what they call a reasonable person standard. Would a reasonable person consider this activity to be hostile? So from a compliance standpoint, how are you going to address this in your organization? And there's three areas that you need to focus on. There are federal standards. Those are non-negotiable. There's state standards. And your state, every state is different. There are some that fall into certain groups of categories. And there are many states that say, for example, that all state employees must comply with these standards, but they don't. And they recommend that other employees in the private sector also comply, but it's not mandatory. And then there are organizational compliance standards. What is it within your own organization that is the policy and the standard that must be followed? So when you're thinking about rolling out your training in your program, you want to think about it from these 3 different levels. From the EEOC standpoint, if you've been involved in training, if you're involved in HR, you're very familiar with these already. Race, color, religion, sex, including pregnancy, national origin, age, disability. These are all categories that are covered under any form of harassment in your organization. The interesting one to me in doing this research and in working on the course was genetic information, and that's relatively new on the horizon. You may not discriminate or provide a hostile work environment in any way based on somebody's genetic testing, or if they have some form, they have testing that uncovers some form of a disease or medical history that they have. So that one will be obviously coming up to be more important in the future. From an organizational standpoint, there are internal policies and procedures in the best practices, and we'll talk a little bit more about this moving forward here, but when we talk about the 7 things that you need to include in your course. But there's policy, there's a message from leadership, there are procedures, how to report, what happens next. And the states offer a lot of guidance for you. If you're in your organization and you're, say, a fast-growing small organization, or maybe there just hasn't been enough enough time spent on harassment in your organization, and you're thinking about that now and knowing that you need to move it a little forward and take it to the next level, the states offer a lot of different guidelines. Different states offer sample policies that you can use. They provide models, things that you can use. So what we did at eLearning Brothers was we took some time to look state to state and gather all this information, and we're making that available to you in a free reference tool. And I'm going to turn it over to Adam because he actually built that tool for you, and he's going to be able to show you how it works.
Before we pass it to Adam, can you go back a slide or two? We have a question about those discriminatory items.
Okay.
Right here. So one person asks, why is 40 or older specified under age?
Because that's the federal guideline. I didn't make it up. That was what was included in our course as the guideline for age discrimination. However, so if somebody's younger and they're discriminated against, it's probably going to also fall under a different category, right? There's just a special case that was made for 40 and over. We worked with a local university in helping to build our course, and then we've also pulled obviously from the EEOC guidelines. These were the categories that were put into our course as being as being the cutoff point. So
okay, I think that answers our question. Adam, I'm going to go ahead and pass the screen over to you.
Great, thank you. So give me just a second here and let me. All right, so I believe you're seeing my screen now, is that correct?
That's right, we see the introduction. Okay,
so like Chris said, we wanted to go through and we wanted to give, because every state has slightly different regulations for their specific state. And so we went through and we created, using some of the state-specific guidelines as well as help from the EEOC and things, we created this little interactive tool that you can use. And obviously in the instructions here just give you, you're going to click on a state to find what's there. But again, like Chris said, this is not meant to be the end-all be-all of legal information. This is the guidelines that were on that state's website, usually there, and then we also include a link to website or to documents that you can research further. And as always, those are, you know, very often changing, especially in this day and age of the new, you know, the new sort of mentality of being very aware of this. And so, you know, I would encourage you to not just take this and say, okay, this is the final word, but I need to go back and check regularly. In fact, one of the states we found, as I was building this, we found a policy that had been issued in December of 2017. So the site we were using to gather some of our research didn't have that listed, and we only found it by going to the state website to verify. So,
Adam, before you start, can you zoom in a little bit on your screen?
Let me see. Is that better?
That is perfect. Thank you.
Okay, so we get started. Let me give my computer just a second to catch up here. And so you can come in and you can see as you hover over the states, you can see, you know, which state you're going to select. When you go to New England, you get the whole another overlay, because some of these states are, you know, if we wanted to click Rhode Island on the big map, that would be really tough. And so we come in here, we can click on Rhode Island. And this is what you'll see, for instance, for Rhode Island. You see a description here. We give you, and then this more information link will take you out to their site, and there's more information here on some of these links. Some of the sites, unfortunately, are, you know, look like they were built in the early days of the internet, as we sometimes see with government information, but we make no guarantee about the prettiness of the sites. We just take you to them. There are some states that have a little bit more information, like in California, you've got some breakdown as far as who must provide the training. And so it gives you some information here about who provides it, what employers need to provide it, then who must be trained, when it must be trained, what topics must be included, and how long it should last. And again, then there's the more information link that will take us out there. If we go out, for instance, to Connecticut, when I go into who must be trained, there's actually some special information here for public employers. So if you're an employer with 50 or more employees, you're supposed to train. And then there's more information here about what specifically needs to be included for public employers. Some states don't have any requirement, you know, no state-specific requirements, sexual harassment training requirements, but there are still some basic guidelines here that you can follow. And again, check the more information link to make sure that it's up to date. And as those, you know, we'll try to keep monitoring those, but this link should take you to, you know, whatever the most up to date is of the state, and at least to some place where if you go back up the URL ladder, you can at least find the state site that then with a little bit of searching, you can find it. Chris and I will both vouch for the fact that some states were much easier to find the information than other states. Some states were rather ironic in which ones were hard to find good information on sexual harassment. But then you can see as you go through and click on the states, they become yellow to indicate that you've clicked on them. And we thought this would be really good because we know nowadays that a lot of employers, a lot of companies aren't isolated to one state. The eLearning Brothers, we've got me in Utah and Chris out in somewhere in the middle section of the country in the snow-covered wasteland of Michigan, right? And so it may be that as we're doing things that Chris and I both need to know about it, or that, you know, our boss, Andrew, needs to know what are the sexual harassment guidelines for those states. And so a tool like this, he could come in and click very easily and find that information rather than scouring through each state's website and so forth. So that was kind of a quick hit presentation on what this tool is. Like they said, Andrew will give you more information about how to access this later as he wraps up. But I just wanted to show you that. This was created, if you're curious, this was created using Storyline 3. And, you know, I'm certainly happy later to do a webinar on some of the tools that I figured out on how to do this, some of the tips and tricks that we found along the way. But with that, I'll turn it back over to Chris.
We actually are getting a few questions that you may have an interest in, Adam.
Okay.
People want to know if this webinar is branded toward customizable courseware. Is that sexual harassment info sheet included in any customizable courseware course?
This is actually the info sheet. You mean the information by state? This is
Yes.
actually an ancillary reference to our customizable courseware that is available to use for you to use as you customize your courseware. So it's not in the courseware itself, but it's something we give to you from eLearning Brothers to help you customize your courseware. That's the whole point.
Okay. Another question. You said this was built in Storyline 3. Are we going to ever find out how you did it? Is what the question is. Adam, do you have anything planned that way?
So I do. I mean, I can show you kind of quickly just a quick overview. I mean, obviously this was built, you know, there's an initial slide with the layers, and then there's the slide where it's got 50 layers or 50 plus layers, which includes New England and so forth, and then several triggers. But I'm happy to go through, you know, Chris and I have talked about doing this to show you some of the things that I did in building this, some of the things that I learned and the tips and tricks and so forth. So I'm happy to do that at a later date as well, to walk you through kind of my process that I went through on this.
Okay, that'd be great. Yeah, this is an extremely useful resource, but also pretty darn impressive, and built right in Storyline 3. So we'll work on getting a webinar and or a blog or 2 or 7 to discuss some of the work that went into that awesome resource. All right, I'll go ahead and turn it back to you, Chris.
Thanks. Thank you so much. Yes. Please ask. I'm so glad you asked, because that's exactly the webinars we have coming up. This is the what it is webinar and why it is webinar. And Adam is very good at the how you do it webinars. And we will definitely be taking apart the tool. And also we have planned in the works some things to show you how to do some of the best practices that I'm going to be talking about here next. And then also, likewise, these are all best practices and tools that you can use. We at eLearning Brothers have a really long history of giving you things that, of course, we want you to be a customizable courseware customer, and of course, we want you to use these with customizable courseware. But also, if you're using our templates, you're using our other tools, you're building your own things. If you're a future customizable courseware or template customer, we want you to use these things as well. So we're making them available to you, and you'll be seeing more. So the things that you're about to see here, the best practices that I've pulled here. I relied heavily on a research paper, Preventing and Correcting Workplace Harassment Guidelines for Employers. And that comes from the College of Business at the University of Southern Mississippi. That will be a link. Andrew's going to pop that in here for you so that you have the link so that you can go and retrieve that paper if you like.
I just posted it in the chat, and we'll also include that in the follow-up email. So if you don't get it now, you'll get it later.
If you don't get it now, it'll be there for you. So the 7 elements that in that paper that they found that are the elements for effective harassment prevention training. Here they are on the screen, and we will go through them now one by one. So first, you need a clear anti-harassment policy. These are one of the things that we make room for your policy. We give in our customizable courseware, we give generalized statement about policy, and then we have a place for you to actually link in your actual company policy. So your policy needs to be clear and it needs to be available. People need to understand what it is and that it's there. Also, a extra bonus, it's super effective the researchers found if you include a statement, or ideally a video statement, that actually puts some teeth into the policy. So from somebody who's trusted in your organization, whose voice matters, include something directly from them into your course. In Customizable Courseware, we give you the source, so it makes it easy for you to actually pop that video in. If you don't have the ability to do video, you can include a photo and include a quote. We do that often. Spell out the behaviors, the specific behaviors that can be considered harassment, and include some that are non-obvious: same sex, same race, female to male, and sexual orientation harassment. One person's joke is another person's harassment. And harassment is really in the eyes of the person who is being harassed. So include examples. Encourage reporting. And that doesn't mean just verbally encourage reporting, but make it easy to report. So in your course, include links to policy and the reporting mechanism, context, include the procedure, and spell out what will happen when you report to take away the fear of reporting. Likewise, to take away the fear, provide retaliation protection. Spell out the protections for complainants and witnesses both in the case of reporting harassment. Likewise, ensure people that when they do report, that their information will be handled in a way that is equitable, that their privacy will be protected, and confidentiality will be provided for both the person who is making the claim and also the person who is being claimed against. Remember that the person who's being claimed against, this can be a very fearful time, and it may be an unsubstantiated claim. So it's very important to take these things seriously and to have a policy in place for handling the investigation in a way that's confidential and provides protections. Provide periodic refresher training, including annual management training and employee awareness programs. Our course that we offer through Customizable Courseware is a great way to provide the employee awareness. You can customize it to your organization, but then also behind the scenes, you need to provide training to management that is different, that talks about how to actually handle the claim and how to do an investigation. And last, ensure that there will be prompt corrective action and that appropriate disciplinary action will be done and in writing. So those were the 7 best practices that are 7 elements of a harassment prevention program, and likewise the training that surrounds that program. As far as like how to approach the training, we all know that if somebody doesn't want to be trained, telling them how to behave isn't going to make a difference. So where the EEOC is moving on this, where best practices are moving on this, is something called bystander intervention training. And basically what you're doing is you're telling your employees what to do if they see something that is disrespectful, and giving them tools for intervening in a safe way. That way we're not completely relying on trying to change any one individual, but actually to create a culture where this kind of behavior is not acceptable, and everybody knows how to take action and is motivated to take action when something happens. So now we get into let's take a look at that from the Customizable Courseware perspective and how we do that. This is a screenshot for our workplace harassment course, and we tick the boxes in the course for the 7 things we talked about. But specifically, let's look a little bit at this example of bystander approach and how you would train your organization to build a culture where this isn't acceptable and everybody knows how to behave. So we use the REAP model. We use the REAP model also in our ethics course. Similarly, it's training you how to recognize when something is happening that's against policy, and then what to do once you recognize that. So recognize the issue. Prior to this, in our customizable courseware course, they would have seen already scenarios. They have an opportunity to do some discernment. They're saying, is this harassment? Is this not? They're making some judgment, and then we give them feedback based on their selection. All of those are customizable, of course, based on your own organization and what it looks like at work. These characters that are dressed in business uniforms here, business suits, they can be changed to be characters to look like your organization and the people that work with your coworkers in your environment and culture. So first, recognize the issue, evaluate viable options, what you should do next, weigh it against, is this really harassment? Did he really mean it? Should I just go talk to the individual on my own? Is that a viable option at this point? If not, elevate, ask for guidance. You might go to HR, you might go to your direct supervisor. Depending on the sensitivity of the situation, you may or may not go to a coworker. You may want to go to somebody who, because you've been taught your internal policy, you know where to go. Because your course already has been modified with links, you know how to contact that individual. And then proceed with your decision. Once you've gotten talked to the person who's given you guidance on what's appropriate, if it's back to you to take action, you proceed with your decision. The decision may be to file a formal complaint. The decision may be to go talk to the person first. Whatever that decision is, proceed with it. So we provide that encouragement in our course. So that's the model we use. That's an example of bystander training, something that either if you're the person who's been victimized, or if you've been seeing this, you're witness to this in your organization, this is a tool that you can use to directly address the situation. Now, professional soft skills are, of course, based on our soft skill library. Soft skills in general are attributes that enable someone to interact effectively and harmoniously with other people at work. So because of that, harassment doesn't happen in a vacuum. Harassment is something that's happening in your culture. And harassment is happening, if it's happening in your culture, because there's something in your culture that's allowing it to take place. Some cultures just nip that right away. I know at my workplace, we joke a lot. We tease each other. If anybody gets a sense that we've in any way done anything to make somebody else uncomfortable or harm them in any way, we go check it out with them. We apologize. We take it because that's the culture that we're in. So having a more civil, transparent culture in general with effective interpersonal and communication skills amongst your employees is probably the #1 thing that you can do to prevent harassment in your organization, to just nip it before it goes anywhere. So this is why I've added here some supplemental soft skills training that you may want to offer to help build your culture in general, along with directly, this is harassment, this is what it looks like, this is what to do. But general ethical behavior, conflict resolution, how to communicate effectively, how to coach. If somebody in your organization is just being brusque or approaching other people in a way that's not okay, how do you coach them? How do you help them improve their behavior in the organization. General interpersonal skills, and then negotiation skills, because negotiation skills are about having those crucial conversations. And if you're a better negotiator, you're going to be better in general approaching others when something's happening and having a difficult conversation. So that's it. That's what we pulled together. We've talked about the research-driven strategies for harassment prevention training. We've shown you our free harassment tool, and we're going to provide that to you for your use in research and for finding models that you can use in your organization. And as you do that, remember, just because your state does not require something doesn't mean it's not the right thing to do. Certainly to the extent that it's easy to add a policy and to follow through with some of these things in your course, in your training, we strongly encourage you to do that, because it is the right thing to do, and because it builds a culture that not only is protecting you from claims and other things that can be costly, but because you're producing an environment with more emotional intelligence where people are going to work better together, enjoy work more, and it'll just have ripple effects throughout your organization. And I've showed you some ways some ideas for using customizable courseware for anti-harassment training, actually for a very reasonable budget. And if you want to find out more about that, Andrew's going to provide some information for how you can check into that here. Our future webinars will include a little bit more. We'll dig into actually the how to get under the hood and the hands-on for how you actually can do some of these things. So that's it, Andrew. Back to the questions.
Thanks, Chris. We actually don't have any questions. It was very straightforward and very informational. Thank you very much. If you wouldn't mind going to your next slide, I do want to make everybody aware, like Chris mentioned, that resource, map resource that Adam built, we will make it available to all those who have participated in this webinar as kind of a thank you. We want you guys to be able to have something that you're able to take away and learn, continue this conversation on your own or with those in your organization. If you want to see more about customizable courseware itself, you can check out our blog at elearningbrothers.com, and there's lots of old recorded webinars about customizable courseware. We've got lots of blog content about that. But if you want to see it in detail, if you really want to see it in action, call in. Give us a call at 801-796-2767. Schedule a demo. We'd love to walk you through some of these courses. You can also send an email at info@elearningbrothers.com. And then, as I mentioned, also you can visit elearningbrothers.com. We have a whole section dedicated to customizable courseware. You might be able to get your questions answered there. So visit, schedule that demo. Adam and Chris, thank you so much for this amazing webinar. Thank you for the map resource. Thank you for taking us through and giving us some advice on how to deal with harassment, sexual harassment specifically in our workplaces and organizations. Hopefully we'll see all of you in our future webinars. We've got 2 webinars coming up next week. Don't forget to check those out. You can go to elearningbrothers.com/events to look at upcoming webinars. So give those a look. Thanks again, everybody, and we'll see you next time.